Hello. Today I'm going to be installing Linux Mint Mate 18.1 Serena. Yes, I said Mate, not Mate. They didn't put an accent mark over the E, so it's Mate. On my Microsoft Surface 3. It's not a Pro. It's only got the Intel Atom CPU, but it does work, sort of. More on that later. Now, a few things that will be needed first. You're going to need either a USB mouse or a USB keyboard with trackpad. You're going to need a USB key with Linux Mint Mate on it. I highly recommend that you create a Windows 10 recovery key, because after you do this, you're going to have Grub installed, and the easiest way to just get back to where you were is to recover your Surface. But the most important thing that you're going to need absolutely is this little guy right here. Yeah, it looks like just a USB hub, but it's not. If you notice, it's got an Ethernet port on the end. The reason you need this is that to get Mint to install, or almost any of the Ubuntu derivatives to install on a Surface 3, you need to be hardwired. The reason for that is, for some reason, the Grub installer included in most of these Ubuntu derivatives is missing something that it needs in order to install on the Surface 3. And when it finds it's missing it, it tries to go out to the internet to download it. There's several bug trackers on this, and what they have found is that, as I said, Grub tries to download it from the internet. The problem with that is part of the install, for some reason, turns off the wireless Ethernet adapter in the Surface 3. And if it's not turned back on, I'm not even sure if it's able to be turned back on, before it tries to go out to the internet, the Grub install will fail and it will not boot. So you need this Ethernet port adapter, and you need a hardwire. All right, let's get to it. I'm going to try to switch over to a screen recording software. We'll see where we go from there. Okay, here we are. First we need to go into Windows and get set up. So the first thing we need to do, obviously, is log into our system. Once we get logged in, there's a couple of things we need to do. The easiest way to accomplish all of this is to open a command prompt as the administrator. So the easiest way to do this is to either type in here, Cortana CMD, and it'll come up with command prompt, right click it, and run as administrator. Or you can right click the Windows logo, select search, which is going to take you right back to the same place, type in CMD, right click, run as administrator. Answer yes. And now we have a command prompt opened as the administrator of the system. So the first thing we need to do is turn off hibernation. The reason we need to do this is because when Windows 10 shuts down, it likes to go into hibernate mode, so that when you turn it back on, it comes up a lot quicker. And that's good in general, but for our purposes of installing Linux alongside of Windows, we need that turned off. So we're going to type in a command, power cfg /hibernate. That's HIBERNATE off. You can do a /H, but I like to spell it out. So anyway, okay, now we have hibernation turned off. Now, since we have this command prompt opened as administrator, we're going to type in another command. We're going to type in diskmgmt.msc. Now what this is going to do, this is going to start up the disk manager in administrative mode, so we can make changes to the disk. Alright, now you'll see here I have three partitions. I have EFI system partition, which is boot. I have the Windows partition, and I have a recovery partition. This is a really good reason to have your Windows 10 recovery key that I mentioned before. This unit originally came with Windows 8. Then it upgraded to Windows 8.1. Then it upgraded to Windows 10. Alright, so by the time everything was said and done, I had like 6-7 partitions here, and it was a very nasty mess. Each upgrade had its own recovery partition using space that on these systems it really doesn't need to be using. We're quite limited as it is. So anyway, if you do a recovery once you get to Windows 10, you can get rid of all that old garbage and get this nice clean layout. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to shrink this C partition so that we have enough space to install Linux on. The reason we have to do this is because, or at least in my case, I have found that whenever I go to install Linux without doing this step, it only gives me the option to erase the whole disk or to do something else, which means you've got to go in and manually set things up, manually shrink things in a partition manager that I'm not familiar with. I could be doing things wrong. I don't know. If I am, let me know. So anyway, I'm going to shrink this partition here. Now I'm going to shrink this down to 35 gigabytes. I'm going to create a 35 gigabyte unallocated partition. So to do that, I need to know what size 35 gigabytes is. So I'm going to, while that's examining the disk, I'm going to start up the calculator. Okay, so now here it's showing me I could shrink it by 80,925 megabytes, and there's no way I need like an 85 gigabyte drive for the Linux that I want to use. I'm only going to give it 35 gigs. Let's see, so what I need to do is 35 times 1024. Okay, 35,840 is 35 gigabytes. So let's go in here, 35,840. Alright, and we're going to shrink this. Okay, so now you see we have this 35 gigabyte unallocated partition. That's where our Linux is going to go. Linux is basically, when I choose the install alongside Windows, it's going to create a swap partition and a primary ext4 partition. I think the swap is going to come in at like 4 gigabytes, something like that. So anyway, I'm going to close all this and I'm going to shut down Windows. Camera so I can show you how to boot up into the Linux Mint USB Live CD USB key without going into the BIOS and changing anything. The reason you can do this is hopefully you've updated your firmware, and there was a change in the firmware that makes allowances for this. So I've got my USB key in my USB hub. Okay, so what we have to do is hold the volume down key and then tap the power key until we see the screen light up, and then we only hold down the volume key until we see the Surface logo appear. Once we see the Surface logo appear, we let go of the volume key, the volume down key. So here we go. Power, there's the light, holding the key down, the volume down key down. There's a Surface logo. We can let it go, and we should boot into the live CD grub screen. And there we are. So we're going to select the Start Linux Mint Mate 64-bit. Now I've tried other distributions. I've tried Ubuntu, I tried Ubuntu Mate, I tried Solus, I tried Feather. I've tried a lot of them, and all of them get to the splash screen and then die. Or in the case of Ubuntu Unity, One time out of 10, it'll get to the desktop and then die. And then maybe one time out of 20, it'll give me a desktop that's functional. I don't know what it is. If you do, let me know. Maybe I'll make a separate video showing that happening. So anyway, we're getting to the desktop. I'm going to switch back to the screen recorder. Right, so now we're back at the screen capture software. And interestingly enough, for some reason I don't get the whole desktop. So I've got my external Logitech keyboard hooked up so I can scroll around, and I'm going to move the taskbar to the top just so we can see it. And top. There we go, that's better. Close this. Now, I've also got the Surface keyboard hooked up, and right now you can't see it, but I'm scrolling around, nothing happening with the cursor. Back to the Logitech keyboard, perfect. I will be showing you a way how to fix that later on. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and install Linux Mint. Alright, English, fine. Install third party, fine. Now I don't want to turn off secure boot. So, you know what, I will. No, I'm not. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel. I'll continue. Alright, so the installer sees the hard drive in the Surface 3 as a MMC disk. So we're going to go ahead, and it wants to unmount it. For this to work correctly, yes, we need to unmount it. So select yes. Alright, now here's what I was mentioning before. Normally if I don't set up the disks beforehand, this is grayed out for me, or it's not even there, I don't recall which. Install Linux Mint alongside Windows Boot Manager. All I get are erase the disk and something else. Actually, you know what? I need to make this a little bit bigger so I can see it better. So give me just 1 second. Come on, you can do it. I don't know why it takes so long to get beyond background. But anyway, fonts, details. Because the Surface 3's screen is so high resolution, everything comes in really, really small. So we're going to change this to 126. Oops, 126. Close. Close. Oh, much better. Okay, so what we want to do is install Linux Mint alongside the Windows Boot Manager. Install now. Alright, so here's where I also mentioned before, it's going to make a swap partition, and it's going to make an ext4 partition. Continue. It's made that out of that 35 gig that we carved out for it. Continue. Yeah, that's fine. Alright. And continue. Alright, so now we're installing, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording until it gets to a point where I have something more to show for you. I thought I would throw this in real quick. Right now it's installing Grub 2. I don't recall if this is where it failed or if it was at the very end without the hardwired Ethernet, but it could be either place. But I just wanted you to see this. Alright, we're done installing, and we're going to go ahead and restart now. The screen's going to go black for a little while it reboots. Rather than setting up the external camera, I'm just going to let it sit there, and I'll try to speed it up in post-processing. I changed my mind because I wanted you to see the Grub menu now that it's installed. Alright, as you can see, we now have Linux Mint 18.1 and we have Windows Boot Manager. So I'm going to go ahead and select Linux Mint 18.1 and switch back to the capture screen. Okay, now we're back to the capture screen. I'm going to go ahead and log into the Linux system. Again, we don't have the full screen due to my capture card, and I apologize for that. I will simply move the taskbar to the top. And there we go. Alright, let me close this, and I'm going to close the Welcome Center. Alright, so now we're here. I still don't have touchpad on the Surface keyboard. You can't see it, but I'm moving around on it and it's still not working. So what I'm going to do, well, first what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, because I'm in the desktop that will be saved, I'm going to go change, again, the font size so it's something that I can see easily. There we go. Alright, so details. 126. Close. And much better. So now that we're here, I want to start Firefox. I'm going to drag it to the edge. Come on. No, to the edge. There we go. And I'm going to search for Linux Surface Tigerite. That's Tigerite PPA. Search. There we go. Should come up with the first entry. And we're going to open a terminal. So the first thing we're going to do, oops, I opened two terminals. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add Mr. Hunt's PPA to our system. Control C and paste. and enter to continue. Alright, then we're going to do a sudo apt-get update. Thankfully enough, he's put all this on his website. And paste. Alright, now while it's doing that, the next thing we'll need to do is a sudo apt-get upgrade. So since that's just a change of one word, I'm going to arrow up to get the last command, backspace to up, and add grade. Sudo apt-get upgrade. Do I want to continue? Yes, I do. Now if I recall correctly, this does take quite a while. So I'm probably going to stop the recording until it's done. Okay, we're finished upgrading. That was using the sudo apt-get upgrade. So now the last thing we need to do is sudo apt-get install Linux-Surface and enter. And yes. This is going to take a few minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording again. Okay, so now we're done installing the package. There's still no touchpad support for the Surface keyboard. So go ahead and reboot the system. I'm going to try not to switch out, and the screen may be black for a while. And restart. Alright, here we are. So, you can't see it, but I'm setting the Logitech keyboard aside, and I'm going to unplug it. No longer need the USB hub, no longer need the USB key, no longer need the wired Ethernet. So let's go ahead and log in. And of course I misspelled my password. So you know, I'm moving the cursor with the touchpad on the Surface keyboard now. So that's all hunky-dory. Alright, once we get the desktop, I'm going to go ahead and connect to wireless. And connect. So, what are the pros of doing this? Well, one of the pros is, well, the major pro is I get Linux. Yay, love Linux. What are the cons of doing this? Well, here's the bad news. One, sound, even though it shows full volume, does not work. Why doesn't it work? Well, as you can see, actually, you know what, let me go into sound preferences. As you can see, the hardware, there's nothing there. So the output is dummy output. It configures a dummy output so applications will work. Nothing really works. And that's a bummer. It really is. Another con of this is that, well, battery monitor is non-existent. If you if you remove, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I hit it in the wrong place. My apologies. If I add, oh, well, okay, you know, while we're here, I'll just make it bigger too, so I can actually see it a little bit better. Oh, there we go, 36. If I add the battery monitor to the panel, all right, add. Okay, here we have our little battery monitor. So, system is running on AC power, no battery present, which is ridiculous because this is a Surface. There's a battery present. If I unplug it, there is absolutely no change. So I never ever know what level my battery is at. So if I'm using Linux, it almost always has to be plugged in because the battery could be at 1% and I would never know it. It would show as being plugged in. So until this gets fixed, Linux is a little iffy on the Surface and you're not going to have any sound at all. I tried the speakers before using the headphone jack and that didn't even work. So not sure what's going on there. Something I'll keep up on. Hopefully they'll get that fixed sooner or later. Now the reason I wanted to use Ubuntu, Ubuntu, the next version that's coming out, I don't recall what it is. I couldn't use it because it didn't support installing the Peter Hunt fix for the touchpad. What it did have over everything else is that you could use your finger, you could use the touch screen capability and the pin screen capability on the Surface. Linux Mint, you don't have that, so I guess that would be considered another con. Alright, well, that's it for this. Probably going to make another video showing some issues I had with Ubuntu later on. I hope you enjoyed riding along with me, and have a good day.